the key thing when you figure out who to get money from is to make sure that your proposition for what you're going to do with that money is strong. If you know what you're going to do with the money, how it's going to be used, the money is available. Chuck made that point, and I completely agree. There's a lot of capital out there. Knowing who it should come from is key. You've got some basic opportunities with banks. We're all familiar, but banks have been somewhat tied down in terms of the regulatory constraints under which they work. We get frustrated with our bank. You think it's obvious they should lend to you. In many cases, where they might have been able to do it 10 years ago, they can't today. There are people who have stepped into that gap. The state, Beatriz Gutierrez is here from DECD. They've stepped in and are lending money in ways that banks can't. They don't want to compete with banks, but they're there. And I often send people there as a first stop. We're kind of a second stop. We work with banks directly. We're a program that was set up by the state in conjunction, but we're completely private. So our process is private. Someone mentioned to me that it can be difficult to work with public entities, whether it's the Small Business Administration, another great program, or even our own DECD, where you can go walk up to Hartford and meet them. It can still be time-consuming. We're much smaller than the state, even as efficient as I think they are. And so working with us is probably a next good stop after you've dealt with your bank. But if you're also looking for things other than debt financing, but maybe want some equity, Connecticut is extraordinarily well positioned for that. In fact, we're, of all the countries, the states in the country, on a per capita basis, we have more private equity managed here than anywhere. Now, that doesn't mean it's invested here, but it is managed here, which means you just go have lunch in Greenwich and find the guy who loves what you do. That's the trick. But people like me can help you identify equity investors that might be the appropriate one. That can be really 4 different categories. You've got your management team, that's been mentioned. You know them. You've got your customers, which I think of as strategics very often. Strategic investors could be customers, might not be, but have a strategic interest in you. That's the next step for looking for equity investments. But beyond that, I highly recommend that you go to the private equity financial world. This is a world where it's cyclical, but right now, valuations remain high. They peaked a year ago, but they're still very high. These guys are paying because they need to get their funds employed. And then there are other equipment people and leasing types of companies that can provide equity, but on a more specific strategic basis. So while I can't say specifically which ones are appropriate for any of you at this moment, I would be more than happy to talk to any of you about specific people who are out there actively investing in manufacturing companies, and there are a lot of them.